Lucas Hart never expected that pulling over to help a stranger on the side of Highway 47 would be the moment that changed everything. All he saw was a 1967 Revell Tempest GT hood up, steam rising into the blazing summer air next to it. A woman who looked like she belonged in a Manhattan boardroom, not stranded on a cracked desert road. She said her name was Vivienne Duvall. Just a traveler. Just a car that needed fixing. But Vivienne wasn't just passing through, and she definitely wasn't just anyone. She was the hidden face behind one of the most powerful auto empires in the country. And by stopping to help her, Lucas had just stepped into a world of corporate warfare, buried secrets, and a connection that neither of them could walk away from. What started with a wrench and a little roadside kindness would soon pull a quiet single dad into the heart of a stormware power. Ambition and long-buried betrayal waited at every turn. But in a world where truth is buried and loyalty is tested, can two people from opposite worlds find something real? Or will her ruthless ex, a collapsing legacy, and Lucas's own hidden past tear it apart before it even begins? Before we dive in, if you love stories about redemption, quiet strength, and the kind of love that rises from fire and steel, this one's for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe to Snail Story, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a chapter. Now sit back, get comfortable, and let's begin. A struggling mechanic stopped to help a stranger with a broken-down Revell. She turned out to be the CEO of a billion-dollar empire. He had no idea she'd just set his whole world in motion. Highway 47 wound through parched hills, its cracked asphalt scorched by the relentless summer sun. The wind swept across scorched grasslands, carrying the scent of hot tar and gasoline. It was a smell Lucas's heart knew all too well, not because he liked it, but because his life had always been tied to grease and worn-out engines. He had just wrapped up his shift at the only garage in Oak Hollow, his hands still stained with oil. Under the harsh sunlight, the sweat on his broad shoulders glistened with a salty sheen. His old pickup truck groaned beneath the wheel, a reflection of his own life exhausted, but never stopped moving. Lucas was just heading home, planning a simple dinner with his 9-year-old son Noah before starting another day like every other. But then he saw it. A 1967 Revell Tempest GT Legendary. Steel silver vintage sat parked on the shoulder, hood popped open, steam billowing from the engine. But what made Lucas ease off the gas wasn't the Corvette, was the woman standing next to it. She looked like a strange dot of color in a gray-toned, world-crisp white shirt. Expensive tailored trousers, oversized sunglasses covering half her face. The wind tousled her hair, revealing a slender, sharply defined figure. She didn't seem panicked nor confused. She stood there, hands on her hips, studying the engine like she was trying to spot the problem herself. Lucas pulled over behind the Revell and stepped out with his trusty toolbox. He walked up slowly, keeping a respectful distance. "Need a hand?" His voice was gravelly but calm. The woman turned, pulling her sunglasses down to her nose, revealing smoky gray eyes, cool and unreadable. "Are you a mechanic?" "Not." "A doctor," Lucas replied with a slight smirk, setting down the toolbox. "Nice car. But I'm guessing these roads aren't on your usual route." She tilted her head with a half smile. "Took a wrong turn." And then the engine decided to quit. Very inconvenient timing. Lucas bent down to inspect the engine. It only took a few minutes to find the issue: a loose fuel line and a partially clogged hose. It's a minor problem, but on a classic like this, enough to cause trouble in the middle of nowhere. "Easy fix," he said, while tightening the connector. "Lucky for you, this happened near town. A few more miles out, and nobody would have heard a distress call." She didn't answer, just watched him work. Her gaze wasn't exactly wary, but it was definitely evaluating. "What's your name?" Lucas asked as he wiped his hands. Vivienne, she replied curtly. Vivienne Duvall. Lucas paused for a beat. Duvall, that name wasn't unfamiliar. Duvall Precision Motors was a major player in the auto industry, and Vivienne Duvall had once graced the cover of Forbes' ruthless yet brilliant CEO, but it couldn't be. He didn't press her. He closed the hood and stepped back. Try the ignition. Vivienne slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The Revelle's engine roared to life, smooth and powerful, as if it had never faltered. She stepped out and looked at Lucas for a long moment. "Thank you," she said. "I owe you one." Lucas shook his head. "It's nothing. It's 10 minutes with a clamp and a wrench. I don't charge for things like that." She frowned slightly. "People don't usually refuse money from me. Maybe I'm not like most people." Vivienne studied him for a second, then put her wallet away. Her eyes softened briefly, like a mask slipping just for a moment. "Lucas Hart, right? I saw your name on your shirt." Lucas blinked in surprise. "You know me?" She smiled. "Not yet, Tet, but now I do." The Revelle rolled off, leaving Lucas standing in the middle of the quiet road, dust swirling in the air. Behind her tires, he watched it disappear, something stirring faintly inside him. Vivienne Duvall, a name that wasn't supposed to show up in Oak Hollow. A woman like her, with cold gray eyes and a pristine classic car, wasn't just lost. And he knew this wasn't over. 3 days after that strange encounter on the side of Highway 47, Lucas Hart still couldn't shake the image of Vivienne Duvall from his mind. There was something about her, not just her appearance, but the way she held herself, the way she looked at him like she was testing, evaluating, choosing. During those 3 days, Oak Hollow remained as quiet as ever. Lucas's garage saw the usual jobs: broken-down tractors, pickups with failing ACs, and the sheriff's cruiser needing new spark plugs. But every time he put his hands on an engine, he could still hear the low growl of that 1967 Revelle Tempest GTA car, too beautiful to have ever wandered into this sleepy town. That evening, as Lucas was preparing a simple dinner for Noah canned spaghetti and toasted bread, the landline in the garage rang. Few people ever called it anymore, especially not this late. He picked up. A polished male voice came through the receiver. "Mr. Hart, this is Alden Pierce, Executive Assistant to Duvall Precision Motors. Ms. Duvall would like to meet with you tomorrow morning at our headquarters in Viridian City." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "I'm not sure I understand. Meet me for what?" "She believes you may be a fit for a key role in an upcoming project. We can arrange transportation, or if you prefer to drive yourself, fuel and lodging expenses will be covered." Lucas went quiet, hand tightening around the phone. That same unsettled feeling from 3 days ago was now rising again, sharper, clearer. "I'll drive. Give me the address." The next morning, Lucas put on his least-wrinkled white shirt, clean jeans, and freshly brushed leather boots. He dropped Noah off with Mrs. Clara, their neighbor, then headed out his first time leaving Oak Hollow in nearly 2 years. The Duvall Precision Motors headquarters in Viridian didn't look like a place that made cars. It looked more like a tech museum, sunlight gleaming off glass walls. A grand marble lobby where every footstep echoed like it mattered. Alden Pierce greeted Lucas in the lobby. The man was tall, silver-haired, and spoke with the calm authority of someone who'd trained in old-world etiquette. "Ms. Duvall is expecting you on the 7th floor. This way, please, private elevator." Lucas said nothing, just nodded. The elevator opened into an office paneled in walnut with sweeping glass walls overlooking the city. In the center of the minimalist space stood Vivienne Duvall, her back turned, facing the skyline. "You came," she said without turning around. "I figured you would." Lucas paused. "You always summon strangers like this." Vivienne turned. Today, she wore a navy blue suit, hair neatly tied back, face sharpened by precision and purpose. She was nothing like the woman by the roadside days earlier. No dust, no broken-down Ravel. Just a cold, commanding figure at the center of power. "It wasn't a summons," she said. "It was an invitation. You chose to come." Lucas stepped forward, meeting her gaze evenly. "So what am I here to hear?" Cute. Vivienne gestured to a chair for him, then sat across the desk. "I need someone to lead a new restoration project for the Campania division focused on vintage performance vehicles. I've reviewed your work in Oak Hollow. It's raw, unpolished, but meticulous. I don't need PowerPoint engineers. Need people who still care about the soul of a machine." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "I'm a mechanic, not a college-trained engineer. You understand cars with your hands and your heart. The rest I can train or hire around you." "And why me?" he asked, voice now edged with seriousness. "You've got engineers, resumes stacked a mile high. Why pick a single father from a town the size of a parking lot?" Vivienne straightened slightly. "Because you haven't lost what most men in your position already have, the belief that every car has a soul. This isn't just about restoration. It's about resurrection." Lucas clenched his fist slightly. He couldn't deny it. A part of him longed for exactly that. But another part whispered caution. Too good to be true comes at a price. "And what's the paycheck for resurrecting automotive souls?" he asked, half mocking. Vivienne slid a folder across the desk. 4 times your current income. Housing, insurance, education expenses for your son all covered. Lucas squinted. "You did your homework on me." "Not much," she said coolly. "Just enough to know you don't like owing anyone. Neither do I." On the drive back to Oak Hollow, Lucas didn't turn on the radio. He let the cabin fill with silence, with only the sound of the engine and Noah's laughter echoing in his mind. Somehow, the smell of motor oil no longer felt as comforting. There was one thing Lucas Hart knew better than most: anything offered too easily usually comes with a hidden cost. And Vivienne Duvall, the woman with 2 faces, wasn't the kind of person who invited you just to fix a few old cars. 3 weeks after that encounter in Viridian City, Lucas Hart officially began his new job at Duvall Precision Motors. He moved to the city with his son, Noah, and rented a small apartment near downtown. Every morning, from the 6th-floor balcony, he could see sunlight reflecting off the company's headquarters, a sleek, gleaming tower that felt nothing like the worn-out rhythm of life back in Oak Hollow. Noah adapted with surprising ease. The boy chatted with new friends at school like he'd never missed the little town. Lucas, on the other hand, felt different. Every time he stepped into Duvall Motors headquarters, he felt like a loose screw lost inside a massive steel gear. On his first day, he wore a clean blue shirt, jeans, and his old leather shoes, miles apart from the tailored suits and gleaming silver watches that surrounded him. People looked at him, nodded politely, then turned away. Not with disdain, nor with warmth, just ... indifference. Vivienne wasn't present for the orientation. Instead, it was Reed Morgan, chief engineer and current head of the restoration division. "You're Hart." Morgan glanced over his safety glasses, his voice low and curt. "Heard you worked at some backwoods garage." Lucas nodded. "Oak Hollow, 11 years. Morgan gave a dry chuckle. "Bet you could swap spark plugs in your sleep." The entire engineering room chuckled lightly. It wasn't mockery, exactly, more like a test. Lucas didn't respond. He'd met men like Morgan all his life, those who drew power from experience and hierarchy, and always saw new blood as a silent threat. "You've been assigned as supervisor of the restoration floor," Morgan said, enunciating every word like it carried insult. "But around here, we don't hand out titles based on favors. You'll earn it." Lucas shrugged. Then let me work. You can decide once it's done. Morgan smirked. Good. I'm giving you the 1969 Falco Stratus. Transmissions shot. Fuel intake misfires, and the suspension's taken a beating. That car is going on display at the Falco Museum. Let's see if a small-town mechanic knows what to do with it. Lucas walked up to the car, a dark beast of a machine body. Scuffed engine wheezing like it was on its last breath. He said nothing. Just opened the hood, pulled on his gloves, and got to work. For the entire first week, Lucas didn't leave the restoration floor. He worked from dawn to late evening, skipped lunch, spoke to no one. Every time an engineer passed by, they'd see him hunched under the chassis, hands smeared in grease, brows furrowed like he was negotiating with the engine itself. Reed Morgan never praised him, never got in his way either. He watched day after day, even slipped a false detail into the technical diagramma trap. Lucas didn't fall for it. By the 8th day, the Falco Stratus came back to life. That first roar of the engine struck like a hammer blow to the pride of everyone who had doubted him. The engine purred. Fuel injections in perfect rhythm. The car glided across the inspection bay without a single squeak. The entire engineering team fell silent. Reed Morgan stood, with arms crossed, his eyes narrowing. Not bad, he said, his tone unreadable, neither praise nor threat. But fixing one car doesn't mean you belong here. Lucas wiped his hands with an oily rag, meeting Morgan's gaze. I'm not here to be welcomed. I'm here to bring cars back to life. For the first time, Morgan didn't smile. That night, when Lucas returned to the apartment, Noah had fallen asleep on the couch with a comic book on his chest. Lucas scooped him up, carried him to bed, and tucked him in. Then he returned to the living room. His whole body aches not from the work, but from something slowly building in his chest. A strange blend of pride and unease. The window let in the cool night breeze. The city lights blazed outside, but Lucas didn't see their shine. He only remembered Oak Hollow, the smell of dry grass after rain, the frogs croaking on summer nights, Noah's bright laughter chasing fireflies. He never said it out loud, but he missed it all. Missed the poverty, the sadness, the honesty. Here, everything was too clean, too perfect, and too easy to feel lost in. His phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. Vivienne, meet me at the design lab, 9th floor, 7:30 a.m. tomorrow. We have something to discuss. Lucas stared at the message for a moment, then set the phone on the table. He didn't need to guess. Nothing was ever. Just a talk with Vivienne Duvall, and he was beginning to feel that every step he took in this world, had already been planned. The design lab on the 9th floor felt like a different world compared to the rest of the building. No more cold glass and gray steel, just bare concrete walls, high ceilings, and soft, warm yellow lights. Sketches of vintage cars from the 1950s to the 1970s hung on the walls, as if someone was trying to preserve a bygone era within this cold industrial age. Lucas walked in at exactly 7:29. Vivienne was already there. She wasn't wearing her usual power suit. Instead, she had on a dark leather jacket, her hair tied low, one hand resting on a folder. Under the soft lighting, her face carried a trace of weariness, not physical fatigue, but the kind born of a silent, ongoing battle. "You're on time," she said without looking up. "I used to work where people told time by the sun, not by watches." Lucas replied dryly. Vivienne let out a faint smile. "Good one." She slid the folder toward him. Inside was a document titled Project RAV-9, Reviving the Legend. "We're preparing to bid for a contract with Eclipse Performance Group, a third-party racing engine manufacturer. If we win, we'll gain 10 years of access to their exclusive Supply chain. That means the restoration division will have access to the best performance parts available. Lucas nodded slightly. And if we lose funding for the commercial vintage line. Everything you're working on could be dismantled within 6 months. Lucas looked her straight in the eye. So, you called me in here to warn me, or to ask something? Both. Vivienne braced herself against the table, her voice lower now. I want you to lead the prototype we'll present for inspection. Not just a restoration or resurrection. An old icon with a brand new heart. Lucas didn't answer. What she was placing on his shoulders wasn't just a technical gamble, it was a reputational one. Before he could reply, a back door swung. Opened and walked a tall man, silver-streaked hair slicked back, black tailored suit, polished leather shoes. The light glinted off the luxury watch on his wrist, casting a glow that seemed to hush the room for a heartbeat. Lucas didn't need an introduction. He had seen that face in finance magazines once, even in an old article his father used to read aloud. Damien, cross-investor, strategist, and Vivienne Duvall's ex-husband. Mr. Hart, Damien said with a smile that stopped just short of condescending. So you're the special one who made Vivienne break her rules. Lucas subtly clenched his fists. I just fix cars. Oh, but she believes you can help her save an entire division. Damien stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away. Eyes scanning Lucas. Quite the wager. Vivienne stood upright. Damien, this isn't a pitch meeting. Why are you here? Simple, Damien shrugged, like he was strolling through an art gallery. Your guy here deserves to know the board has started discussions on divesting non-core assets. Your restoration project. Top of the liquidation list. No one has the authority to make that call but me, Vivienne replied, her tone cold as steel. Until my shares match yours, Vivienne, Damien said with a thin smile. And I just bought an additional 6% from the Treadstone Fund. Lucas frowned. You come here to threaten her. Damien turned to face him fully. I came to remind you that this is an adult's game. Around here, ideals don't beat balance sheets, and personal entanglements between executives and subordinates don't exactly raise shareholder value. Lucas took a step forward. His voice was calm and low. You know what's funny, Mr. Krause? People who are used to winning often don't realize when they've started losing control. Damien smirked. Sounds like something a man says, right? Before he fails, Vivienne cut in. That's enough. Both men turned toward her. Her face, in that moment, wasn't cold or sharp, was resolute. Like a fortress that had weathered every storm and still stood strong. Damien, if you want to play dirty, go ahead, she said. But I don't back down from threats. And? As for you, Lucas, she met his eyes. If you're not ready for this fight, it's better to walk away now. Lucas looked at her, then at Damien. No, he said slowly. I'm not walking away. I'm just getting started. Damien gave a faint chuckle, nodded once, then turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, but it didn't block out the chill he left in the room. Vivienne exhaled. I'm sorry, I didn't think he'd show up in person. Lucas shook his head. I don't care what he says. But I do want to know if we lose. Truly lose, what exactly does he take from you? Vivienne was quiet for several heartbeats. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, everything I built with my own hands. The Duvall name and the right to decide my own future. Lucas said nothing more. But inside, a decision had just taken root, not for the contract, not for the project, but for the woman standing in front of him. A woman who didn't need a knight, just someone who wouldn't run when the storm rolled in. Lucas Hart was not someone who liked digging into the past. To him, old things were best left alone, like a car that had been taken apart too many times. The more you tried to reassemble it, the more you realized it would never run the way it used to. But a week after Damien Cross made his first move, Lucas realized there are fractures that silence can't seal. He received a package. No return address. Inside was an envelope containing a copy of a technical report dated 2004, printed on yellowing paper. Ink slightly smudged as if it had been water-stained. The title froze him: Prototype Test Report, RAVOX Series, Technical Supervisor, Thomas Hart. His father, Lucas, sat motionless at the desk in the small office next to the restoration workshop. His hands trembled slightly as he turned. Each page, notes scribbled in the margins. Familiar handwriting, sharp, rigid, leaning slightly left. Just like the memos his dad used to stick around the garage back in the day. The final handwritten line: unsafe. Chassis structure, fails safety standards. If used for commercial model, full frame redesign required. Right beneath it, a signature. Crossed out, it wasn't his father's. It was Damien Cross's. That afternoon, Lucas didn't work. He drove out of downtown Viridian to the city's industrial archives. Library, a facility that stored technical records of automotive projects, spanning over 3 decades. He used his company badge to access the restricted section. To his surprise, the Duvall name opened more doors than he'd expected. In a quiet room that smelled of old paper and sawdust, Lucas pored over thick folders. The RAF's Project 10. Unreleased race car prototype. Notes revealed that the original lead engineer had been Thomas Hart, but he was removed from the project due to personal reasons. Weeks later, Duvall Motors publicly announced the project had failed. The prototype was scrapped, and Thomas Hart disappeared from the auto industry without a word of explanation. Lucas remembered that time vividly. He was 17. His father stayed up for nights on end, eyes sunken, face drawn tight like a wire ready to snap. One day, he said he had to go on a short business trip. And then, he never came back to the profession he loved, the little garage. That opened afterward. That was all that remained of a man who had once been one of the top lead engineers in the East. When Lucas returned to Duvall Motors that evening, the building was nearly empty. He didn't go home, didn't eat dinner, didn't call Noah. All he carried inside him was a slow-burning rage cold as steel, sharp as a freshly honed blade. Vivienne's office light was still on. He didn't knock. He walked in. She looked up, surprised but not startled. Something wrong. Lucas threw the file onto her desk. "What do you know about my father?" She paused for a beat. Then, very slowly, she closed her laptop and stood up. "More than you think." Lucas clenched his fists. "I want the whole story." Vivienne didn't deflect. She gestured for him to sit, then poured herself a glass of water as if steadying her voice to deliver something she'd owed for too long. "I wasn't on the executive board back then," she began. "But I know your father designed the foundational structure for the performance car line Duvall planned to launch internationally. It wasn't just talented, he was obsessively committed. When he discovered the chassis couldn't withstand high-speed collisions, he demanded the entire project be shut down. And Damien disagreed," Lucas said flatly. Vivienne nodded. He'd invested most of his personal wealth into that project. If it was pulled, he lost everything. So he pressured the board to remove Thomas, branded him mentally unstable. A month later, the press began publishing slanted articles that your father was difficult, stubborn, unwilling to adapt to new technology. And you did nothing. "I didn't have the power," Vivienne whispered. "I was on the sidelines until after the divorce." Lucas let out a dry laugh. "You say you don't owe anyone, but you owe my father. And now you're using me to make it right." Vivienne stepped closer. "I chose you because you're good, because I believe you can do what my entire engineering division hasn't bring. That car back, properly, and in the spirit your father once held." Lucas looked at her. In her gray eyes was something rare, bare honesty. No armor, no game. Just a woman trying to undo a mistake, no matter the cost. Finally, Lucas exhaled. Then take me to the RAVO's prototype, if it still exists. Vivienne nodded. It was never destroyed. I hid it in a storage facility on the west side of the city. No one but me has been inside in 10 years. Lucas stood, voice firm. Tomorrow morning, we go. Vivienne nodded, and Lucas. He stopped, but didn't turn around. She said, softly, "Thank you for being willing to face the past." Lucas replied without looking back, "I'm not facing it. I'm fixing it." Duvall Precision Motors Auxiliary Facility sat on the western edge of Viridian, cut off from the city by a row of weathered cement warehouses and a rusted steel fence. No signage, no nameplate. Without the keycard Vivienne had given him, Lucas wouldn't have believed this place had once been the top-secret tech testing center of an entire automotive empire. The warehouse door creaked open. Inside was dust, dried oil, and a car hidden beneath a black tar plying, still like a forgotten dream. Vivienne stepped forward and pulled the cover down. The RAVO-X merged like the ghost of a future that never happened. Long body, sharp curves. A silver paint dulled like smoke. The tires were flat. The windshield faintly cracked. But Lucas didn't see the damage. He saw something his father had once dreamed of. Loved enough to risk everything for. He walked slowly around the car, stopping to rest his hand on the door handle. "It's still breathing," he murmured. "Just been asleep too long." Vivienne stood still, as if any movement might awaken a past she wasn't ready to face. "Can you restore it?" she asked. Lucas didn't hesitate. "No, but I can. Rebuild it, from scratch, just like my father intended." She looked at him, her eyes softening in a rare, quiet pause. "Then we start here." 2 days later, Vivienne received a formal summons from the Duvall Motors board, an emergency meeting. The agenda, to review her executive qualifications as CEO, citing non-transparent staffing decisions and a restoration initiative misaligned with core growth strategy. Office speak, neatly worded. But Vivienne understood. This was Damien Cross's first direct strike. She entered the boardroom, a marble-floored chamber on the 10th floor, once occupied for 3 decades by her father. Now, the long table was surrounded by major shareholders, lawyers, and a few swing-vote faces that tended to follow whichever wind blew hardest. Damien was already there, seated at the opposite end of the table, wearing his usual indifferent smile and eyes sharp as blades. "We'll begin," said board chairwoman Margot Velez, Vivienne's stepmother, with a voice like dried parchment. "Vivienne, you've been called to justify the appointment of a non-certified technician to lead a key company initiative, as well as the allocation of company funds toward restoring a prototype scrapped 2 decades ago." Vivienne stood tall, voice calm but unwavering. Because no engineer on this board understands that car like Lucas Hart does. Because that prototype is more than a relic, it's proof that this company once chose to bury the truth for the sake of profit. "I won't do that," Damien interjected. "So instead, you hand the project to someone personally connected to the original prototype, in the name of justice or sentiment." Margot chimed in. "You and this man, are you in a personal relationship outside of work?" A cold silence swept the room. Vivienne didn't flinch. "Lucas Hart and I trust each other. However personal that trust is, it does not affect the quality of the work. And if this board is truly concerned with results, then let me present the prototype after 30 days. If it fails, I step down as CEO. If it succeeds, Damien relinquishes all influence over any technical project within this company." Damien laughed softly. "You're wagering your entire family legacy to protect a mechanic," Vivienne replied, voice like ice. "No, I'm protecting the very thing that once made Duvall Motors different. Loyalty to engineering, truth not." Two fabricated earnings reports. The room fell quiet. Margot laced her fingers, glancing at each board member. "Your proposal is noted. A vote will be held in 3 days." That afternoon, Lucas was in the workshop with a team of newly hired engineers, mostly young, hand-picked by him. They were dismantling the RAVOX chassis. His hands were covered in grease, but beneath the focus was a growing unease. Vivienne walked in just as he was inspecting the driveshaft. He looked up and saw weariness in her eyes, mixed with something deeper, a kind of drained belief in the people she once called family. "You okay?" he asked. Vivienne sat down beside him, silent for a few seconds. Then she exhaled, soft as a confession. "They want me to choose between you and the company." Lucas said nothing. Now he, too, could feel the wind shifting. Hard, he wiped his hands and looked at her. "So what are you going to choose?" She met his eyes. "I don't know yet. Not afraid of losing my title. I'm afraid of losing myself." Lucas nodded slowly. "Then don't choose for me. Don't choose for my father, or the Duvall name. Choose because for once you want to live without compromising." Vivienne gave him a faint smile, rare, fragile thing that hurt more than it comforted. "You're the first person who's ever said that to me." Lucas shrugged. "Guess I better get used to being unemployed soon." They both laughed. And in that fleeting moments, surrounded by metal dust and workshop lights, they were no longer CEO and engineer. They were just two people bracing for a storm, standing on opposite ends, but holding on to the same anchor: faith in what's right. No one said a word when Lucas turned on the music that morning. Classic jazz filtered through the welding sparks, clanging tools, and the low drone of ventilation fans in the secondary workshop of Duvall Motors. But the young engineers, most of them once labeled too inexperienced to lead, didn't mind. They glanced at Lucas, gave small nods, and carried on with their work as if the music was just another rhythm they needed to breathe. Today, they began rebuilding the frame of the ROX. Lucas stood at the lift, hands smeared in oil, sweat soaking through his t-shirt, metal dust clinging to his skin. In front of him, the car's frame showed signs of oxidation, its weld joints cracked from years of stillness. But the lines were still there, sharp and precise, so perfect, it made his chest tighten, as if he were staring at his father through steel. "We're not fixing an old car," he said, voice low and steady. "We're building something that never got the chance to exist. The right version of what should have been finished 20 years ago." Catherine, the youngest electronics engineer on the team, tilted her head. "Mr. Hart, what do we keep?" Looked around, then tapped gently on the chassis. "We keep the soul. But every internal system, engine, electronics, transmission, has to be brand new. It'll look like the 1960s on the outside, but its heart will beat like it's 2025. The team replied in unison. "Got it." The real battle had begun. Through arguments, but through hands and hearts. 3 days later, Vivienne arrived at the workshop before dawn. No assistant, no warning, no suit. Just a crisp button-down shirt, dark jeans, and her hair tied back. She walked in just as Lucas was showing Leo a fresh out of school recruit how to interpret heat data from the combustion chamber. "You torturing the kids already?" she joked. Lucas turned and smiled faintly. "Here to check our progress or get your hands dirty. To work." Vivienne held out her hand. "Mask and gloves, please." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You know the difference between a soldering torch and a torque wrench?" "Not really. But I know what a good weld looks like. My father taught me." Their eyes met, no teasing, no challenge, just a quiet acknowledgement. It was time to stop standing on the sidelines. From that day on, Vivienne showed up at the workshop for at least 2 hours every day. She learned to measure axle deflection, learned to recognize the offbeat hum of a misaligned gear, learned to tune an engine by feel, something no manual could teach. Lucas saw in her the same obsession for precision he once saw in his father's eyes. But unlike his father, who lost everything because he refused to bend, Vivienne carried a colder, sharper instinct for survival. "You think I stood next to Damien all those years and didn't learn anything?" she asked one night when the shop had emptied out and only the two of them remained. Lucas nodded. "You learned how the game's played so you'd know exactly how not to become him." Vivienne smiled a weary, honest smile. On the 10th day, Barov's received its new engine, a V8 hybrid, custom configured by Lucas using his father's old blueprints and the latest data from Eclipse Performance. This was the new Hart. Not just powerful, but smart, responsive to every shift of the throttle like a finely tuned instrument. "We're ready for ignition," Catherine said. Lucas nodded and motioned everyone to stand back. He climbed into the cockpit black leather seat, a dashboard that looked vintage but housed modern circuitry beneath the surface. He rested his hand on the steering wheel, cold, rigid, but familiar, like touching a memory. A single beat of silence. Then he turned the key. The engine didn't roar. It breathed deep, warm, steady, like the first breath of something that had been buried alive. The workshop fell completely still. Lucas pressed gently on the gas. The response was silk smooth, thunder-strong. Every gauge on the dash lit up. In unison, no faults, no hesitation. The Ravhawks had come alive. Vivienne stepped forward, standing beside him, eyes fixed on the machine. "You know," she whispered, "I used to think justice was something you only found in law books. But hearing that engine, I believe your father heard it too." Lucas didn't say a word. But in his eyes, something glimmered, like the oily, calloused hand of his had just brushed the shadow of his father in a dream. That night, after dinner, Noah climbed into Lucas's lap. The boy looked up and asked, "Is Grandpa's car almost done, Dad?" Lucas nodded, ruffling his hair. "Almost. But it's not just Grandpa's car, it belongs to all of us." Noah frowned thoughtfully. "Can it win?" Lucas smiled. It doesn't need to win, Noah. It just needs to run for the reason it was built." Noah paused, then nodded. "Then it's just like you." Lucas said nothing. But that simple, pure statement hit something deep. He had spent so long living in the shadow of sacrifice. And now, for the first time, he saw it clearly. Not everything gets lost. Some things remain buried in the heart, waiting to be brought back by hand. The morning began like any other, sunlight streaming through the workshop's glass panes. The clang of tools beating out a familiar rhythm. And the Aravox resting silently on the lift, beautiful as a sculpture carved from steel. Lucas, Hart, didn't know the storm was already gathering, not from the sky, but from an envelope left at his apartment door. 8. No return address. Inside was an emergency petition for child custody, along with a copy of a juvenile record from 2008 when Lucas, still a teenager, had been arrested in a fight. A record long expunged. But now it had been unearthed, accompanied by a stack of anonymous claims. Unstable living environment, exposure to toxic work conditions, emotional risk stemming from an improper relationship with a female superior. At the bottom was the complainant's name, Damien Cross. Lucas stared at the documents as if they were made of explosives. Not because he feared losing, but because this was a line he never thought Damien would cross. "Noah, you sure you want to face him?" Vivienne asked from the window of her office as Lucas tossed the file onto her desk. "I'm not meeting him," Lucas said. his voice lower than usual. "I'm confronting him. He's crossed the line." She sighed, hand to her forehead. "Thought he just wanted to sabotage the project. But now it's clear he wants to destroy you." "Not just me," Lucas said through gritted teeth. "He wants to prove to you that anyone who stands beside you gets crushed." Silence hung between them. "So what now?" she asked softly. Lucas met her gaze. "Now, I fight." Duvall Motors' legal office immediately sent Lucas to meet Eleanor Greavesa, veteran family law attorney who had gone toe-to-toe with Damien in 2 prior divorce trials. A woman with silver-streaked hair, blade-like eyes, and a voice so calm it left people unsure when the dagger would land. "This isn't a custody case," Eleanor said, flipping through the file. "This is a psychological ambush. He doesn't need to win. He just needs you afraid." Lucas folded his arms. "I'm not afraid." "Then are you ready to go public with your arrest record?" Lucas paused. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "I'm not?" "Because of the charge. Because of how it'll be twisted." Vivienne interjected. "We can manage the media if needed." "No, you shouldn't," Eleanor said, cool and sharp. "Reacting means we've already lost. What we need is proof that Damien is weaponizing the legal system to pressure a single father for personal gain." Lucas looked at her. "Do we have a play?" She smiled. "Did you forget? I once took Damien's entire logistics company from him in an asset dispute. Now I just need him to show a weakness, and I'll drag down the empire he built on it." Afternoon. Lucas picked up Noah from school. The boy was sitting under a tree reading, his face calm as always. But when he spotted his father, he lit up and ran toward him. Lucas knelt and hugged him tightly. "What's wrong, Dad?" Noah asked, voice soft. Lucas pulled back and put a hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me, Noah. Soon, some people might say things that aren't true about me, about where I work, about Miss Vivienne." Noah frowned. "Why?" Lucas hesitated. "Because someone wants to take me out of your life. But I promise I won't let that happen." The boy thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe you, just for words." But to Lucas, they held more weight than any courtroom argument. The next day, Damien Cross held a surprise press conference as a senior shareholder of Duvall Motors, framed perfectly with lighting, attire, an expression calculated to a T. He spoke calmly. "I'm concerned about recent non-transparent staffing decisions at Duvall and about the unsuitable work environment affecting minors indirectly through unregulated romantic relationships." No names mentioned, but everyone knew exactly who he meant. The media responded immediately. Some attacked, some dredged up Lucas's past. Others questioned the nature of the unclear relationship between CEO Vivienne Duvall and the head of the Air Vox project. Vivienne said nothing publicly. But behind the scenes, she wasn't quiet. One evening, she knocked on Lucas's door. "We need to strike back," she said, as soon as he opened. "How?" Lucas asked. She set a USB drive on the table, by dragging him into the light. Lucas looked at her, skeptical. "This is an internal recording from 4 years ago. Damien pressured a technical contractor to falsify quality specs to inflate share value before an IPO. I kept it as ... insurance. Now I want you to use it if comes to court." Lucas sat down slowly. "You realize what this means, don't you?" "Yes," she said. "It means I won't have a way back. But if I do nothing, you lose Noah. And I lose the right to call myself a leader. Because if leading doesn't mean protecting the good people around you, then what makes me any different from Damien?" Lucas picked up the USB, his hand tightening around it. "So this is the final move." Vivienne shook her head. "No, this is his final move. We're just getting started." Outside, the wind swept across the rooftops, kicking up soft dust into the city lights. In that small room, between two people who had once been fragments of broken dreams, something else was beginning to take shape. Not just a restoration, but a beginning built not only with machines, but with everything that survives when belief is tested: heart, courage, and defiance. Lucas sat in front of his computer all night, the cold glow of digital files casting a pale fire across his face. The USB Vivienne had handed him contained more than he expected, not just internal recordings, but a string of financial documents, analysis reports, and email threads between Damien and an army of advisors. One file took his breath away. Hart_report_suppressed PDF A. Report his father had written after being forced off the RAVS project. It was short, but it bled. I object to releasing the RAVS chassis for commercial use. At speeds over 180 kilometers per hour, the current frame design will likely fracture beneath the driver's seat. I refuse to sign. I won't kill in silence. At the bottom, in rough, uneven handwriting, if someone is reading this, means I can no longer speak. Lucas's hand clenched tightly. Memories of his father, a quiet man with rough hands and sad eyes, flooded back like a rising tide. His father hadn't withdrawn. He hadn't given up. He'd been silenced, and now Lucas was the voice his father never got to have. The next morning, Lucas entered Duvall Precision Motors headquarters in a dark t-shirt, clean-shaven, eyes hard, with the look of someone who had nothing left to lose. He walked straight into Eleanor Greaves's office and placed the USB on her desk. "Is it enough?" he asked. Eleanor inserted the drive and scanned through its contents. In under 5 minutes, she looked up, her gaze like sharpened steel. Not just enough. This could burn Damien Cross to the ground. "Then let's begin," Lucas said quietly, "before he makes his next move." An emergency board meeting was called. Damien, of course, was present. He never missed a battlefield, he thought. He'd already won. He entered the room like a man walking into a coronation. Light smirk, handshake with Margot. Polite nods to the major shareholders. Vivienne sat at the head of the table. No makeup, a plain gray shirt. Her eyes still razor-sharp, held something new tonight. The readiness to stand her ground, with nothing left to hide. "We're here to address allegations surrounding the legality of the RAVOS project," Margot began. "Mr. Cross, do you have evidence to support your claim that this initiative poses a financial threat?" Damien smiled. "I made my position clear during the press conference. The project lead has a criminal record, no formal qualifications, and is in a personal relationship with the CEO. I think that speaks for itself." Lucas stood up. "What about this man?" said, holding up a printed financial report from 2020. "The one who pressured the company into falsifying quarterly reports to inflate stock value ahead of an IPO. The one for whom we have recordings, signatures, and email confirmations." Eleanor rose, handing out copies to every board member. The big screen, the recording played Damien's voice, smooth and unmistakable. "Scrap it, boost the numbers. We need this quarter's profits to spike, or the investors will start looking elsewhere. Quality, I'll handle it. Just make sure nothing leaks." A slow clap came from the end of the table. Not applause, just punctuation. Damien's face lost its smirk. A mask cracked, piece by piece. "You once called me unqualified," Lucas said, voice calm and low. "But you're the one who built a company on lies. I fix cars. You fix the truth." Margot nodded solemnly. "We will now vote to suspend Damien Cross from all executive privileges and active shareholder status." No one objected. Damien stood, forcing a smile. "You all think I'm out of moves," Eleanor answered coolly. "Oh, you've still got pieces on the board, but they're all face up now." That night, the media exploded with headlines. Damien? Cross-suspended indefinitely, financial scandal may trigger criminal investigation. Lucas left the building without looking back. He drove to Noah's school. It was late, but the playground lights were still on. Noah sat alone on a bench. Reading? You're late? The boy said, not upset, just stating a fact. Lucas sat beside him. I just finished a long chapter. And from now on, we're starting a new one. Noah tilted his head. What kind of chapter? Lucas smiled gently. One where no one can take me away from you. The past dim what we have right now. Noah nodded and leaned into his father's side. Then let's write it together. Lucas nodded. Yeah, we'll write it. Not with hidden scars, but with memories reborn. That same night, in the workshop, the rafts received its final coat of paint, a smoky silver finish that shimmered under the lights like still water. Vivienne stood beside it, her hands still smelling faintly of chemicals. Her eyes brighter than they had been in years. Tomorrow, she said, we present it to the eclipse board, and nothing's going to stop us now. Lucas stepped beside her and took her hand. Not tomorrow, he whispered. Today. We already won because we held on to what's worth believing in. Vivienne leaned her head on his shoulder. Then let the world know. Sometimes, what's dead doesn't stay that way. Not if we're brave enough to remember. That morning, Viridian City held its breath. Not because of the weather, but because of something unprecedented. Duvall Precision Motors opened its showroom to the public for the first time in over a decade. A space once reserved exclusively for investors and engineers. At the center of every gaze, the RAVO symbol. Once buried, now risen from the ashes. It stood there, quiet, and every curve of its body caught the morning sun like a declaration. We're back this time. The right way. Vivienne stood beside Lucas, dressed in a simple black suit. Her hair loose, face bare of makeup, but radiant like someone who had just washed her soul clean. Lucas looked the same as always, t-shirt, jeans, worn-out boots. But in his eyes, there was no more defensiveness. Only the calm certainty of a man who had walked through fire and didn't lose himself. You driving? She asked. Lucas gave a small smile. I fixed it. You saved it. You drive. Vivienne hesitated briefly, then nodded. All right. Outside the showroom, representatives from Eclipse Performance Group, 3 men and a woman in gray. Jackets waited beneath a banner that read, A New Chapter for High-Performance Classics. Lucas opened the door for Vivienne. She slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel as if she were feeling her own heartbeat. When she turned the key, the engine came alive, not loud, but rhythmic, pulsing like a symphony, deep, steady, and warm enough to make your skin tingle. The car eased onto the test track, its speed gradually rising. Through the glass, people didn't just see a machine in motion, they saw a woman once buried beneath corporate assumptions now steering the very thing meant to silence her. Eclipse didn't need long to decide. 45 minutes later, they made it official. Duvall Motors will lead the new Performance Classic Vehicle initiative starting next fiscal year. Vivienne lifted her head as the verdict came in. Lucas placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Congratulations, he said. She looked at him, looked long enough to say everything. Thank you. I'm sorry. And maybe. Can we start again? Not for a reason, but just for ourselves. Weeks passed. Autumn scattered golden leaves across the city. Noah sat in the back seat of the car. Doodling a rough sketch of the rafts with colored pencils, he held it up for Lucas to see. I'm gonna be an engineer like Grandpa. Lucas smiled, ruffling his son's hair. He'd be proud. As for Lucas, he didn't need anyone to be proud of him. He just needed to know that this boy would grow up in a world where justice wasn't some vague idea, One afternoon, as the sun started its descent, Lucas and Vivienne drove out of Viridian not for work, not to run, but just to go. Just to breathe. Out on the open highway, there were no fences. No limits. Just wind slipping through the windows, the scent of fresh leather, and the engine's hum, not just machinery, but the universe's reply to those who had the courage. To rebuild it, I used to think I was born to protect a company, Vivienne said, eyes fixed on the horizon. Now I think, maybe I was born to protect what's right, even if it means giving up power. Lucas nodded. I used to think I wasn't enough, that all I knew could help me survive, but not build. But maybe, if you trust your own hands, you can rebuild. A dream. They stopped at a roadside diner, ate greasy burgers, drank strong coffee, listened to classic radio. One song came on like guitar. A voice soft and worn. I've been running from the fire. Now I carry it with pride. Vivienne turned to Lucas. Do you see it? The car? It's just like us. Old, buried, but still burning, and reborn by the very thing that once broke it. Lucas said nothing. He simply reached for her hand, not out of need, but out of want. For the first time, months later, at the official launch event for the RAV series in Turin, Italy, a city where many automotive legends were born, Vivienne stepped onto the stage to present the RAV1, the commercial version of the once-lost prototype. Lucas didn't watch from the audience. He waited backstage wearing a mechanic's coat, sitting beside Noah, was about to test drive a kid-sized mini version of the RAV. My friends asked if you're the one who made that car, Noah said proudly. I just kept it alive. Lucas replied, the way it was always meant to live. The boy nodded, then whispered, if Grandpa were here, where do you think he'd be sitting? Lucas glanced toward the stage, then pointed to an empty seat near the edge. Right there, he said. Quiet, but seeing everything. That night, Lucas and Vivienne strolled through the old stone streets. Warm yellow lights washed over the walls like the color of memory. You should write a book, she said, about cars, about the journey. Lucas chuckled. It's just fragments, a broken chassis. A man who'd lost everything. A woman caught in her own war. Vivienne stopped walking and looked at him. But none of them fell. He took her hand, pulling her close, and all of them knew. It's the cracks that let the light through when fire passes. She smiled, placing her hand on his chest. Then call it a symphony of fire and steel. He nodded. And of love not to be saved, just to be right. They kissed under cathedral bells and the faint purr of engines in the distance. The dream had been repaired. The car had been reborn, and the people finally had found their way home. Thanks for watching today's story on Snail Story. We hope you felt every beat of loss, courage, and trust, the kind of strength that can restore not just a machine, but a heart. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next chapters. And hey, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. Snail Story would love to know which corner of this emotional map you call home.